And we're
Hello.
live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 15 of Wake Up.
And smell the rosin.
Oh boy, and do I need a lot of rosin today. This weather, I don't know what happened, but in the morning it was nice and sunny, and then all of a sudden it got super, super cloudy. And I just went, like, my eyes just started closing. Like, this is probably already about sixth or seventh espresso shot from our Nespresso machine today to get me going. But nevertheless, we do have a really exciting episode for you guys. So thank you so much for tuning in. Esther, take it away.
Yes, so we are super pumped to have our good friend Dania Mirel Cruz. She is from the Colegio de San Juan Siglo 21 or
Nice
21.
pronunciation.
And they are located in Matamoros, Mexico. We had the pleasure of doing a masterclass and performance with them before COVID.
Yeah,
actually about a year ago now.
Yeah, right.
Because it was like the first week of March, so we're almost there. But I had the pleasure of hearing Dania play back then, and she's wonderful. And we actually have a video from her, so we're gonna be doing a masterclass from her video, just because sometimes internationally the Wi-Fi can be a little bit spotty. We wanted to be sure that we had the best quality possible for her and for you. It's a beautiful video. She does a great job. She's going to be playing the Courante from the first Bach suite. And then she also has some questions that she asks at the end, which she says first in Spanish and then are translated into English. And I also have the questions written down here, just in case we need to reference them later. But go ahead.
I wanted also to welcome, I know that my former student Joaquin Ruiz is tuning in for this live stream. So hi Joaquin, say hello if you're there right now, or maybe when you tune in a little later. And also a lot of students and peers of Dania's are going to be tuning in, and I want to welcome them personally because the same time when we went to play a concert and do a masterclass in that school, I also had a privilege of teaching a lot of violin students, and they're absolutely wonderful. And I'm just so happy that we can do this. So we are going to do it in English, but I know that we have a lot of our bilingual friends. Well, I'm bilingual too, but the wrong language, second language. So those of you, our friends, you know who you are, who are tuning in and who are very fluent in Spanish as well as in English. Feel free to, if you want to, just put in the chat sometimes translation of what our English, what our comments. Please feel free. We would love for you to do that. If you can help us out, that would be really, really fantastic.
Yep, and the video will be up later as well. So for translation purposes, if you need it translated, it will be up as all of our live streams are. So
I also wanted to introduce something new that we're starting. We are asking our listeners, subscribers, or if you're not subscribed, please do so, to actually send us in if you have any particular questions about any repertoire you're working on, maybe about your students that you're teaching. Please let us know, and you can video record your question, because I know sometimes it's daunting to actually send in your performance of the whole piece. You're welcome. We would love to have shorter video questions by you recorded, where you could either record your performance and then ask us a specific question, maybe a snippet, or just ask us anything you would like when as far as it pertains to violin, cello, or viola playing, any repertoire. And so next week we will be actually featuring our very first video question from a very good friend of mine, and their mother and daughter.
It's really cute.
They both started learning to play piano almost at the same time, not very long ago. So they sent in the cutest little duet they're playing and asked us a question, but we're saving that little video for next episode, which will be actually next week, because we skipped a week. So our next live stream will be next week, so we can catch up on our schedule.
And we still have a link in our Instagram at Sightstring Pros for relief for Texans. If you remember, you might have seen our post. The reason we did not have a live stream last week was because of the power outages in Texas, and also they affected, Mexico as well, and upper Mexico. And so we want to, make sure that you all know that, first of all, we're okay. We've been having a lot of friends check in on us, and it's been really great. We're okay, but also just, to keep praying and sending positive thoughts to the people of Texas.
Yes.
And if you're interested in finding ways to support, we have an article linked in our Instagram bio to Time Magazine. And it's kind of a really comprehensive article about what happened, and also with some reputable sources to give and donate to if you're interested. So that's that. Right. So we're back on track now.
Yes.
I'm gonna go ahead and screen share this video. So this is gonna be Dania Mirel Cruz, and she is going to be playing the Courante. So I'm going to screen mirror this. Francis says good morning, checking in.
Hi, good morning, Francis. Thanks for tuning in. By the way, I really enjoy your questions on our video. And I don't know if you just tuned in, but we were just talking about sending video questions. Please feel free if you ever want to do that. We would love to feature anyone with the shorter videos in our future live streams and of course answer your questions. By the way, today we're up to 941 subscribers, and just a reminder, as soon as we get to 1,000, hopefully soon, we're gonna have a live stream party that will be titled Pizza and Piazzolla, where we'll be basically making a pizza and playing some Piazzolla for you guys, so we can have a little fun party for that. So get your friends to sign up, to subscribe, and most of all, guys, please like the video. If you like it, please do hit that like button. Apparently that does help the video to get around, and the algorithm kind of likes that when you hit a lot of likes. So please don't forget to like us if you're enjoying this live stream.
Awesome. Ready?
Yep. Okay.
Hola, mi nombre es Dania Cruz y voy a tocar la Courante de la suite 1 de Bach. Otra es en el compás 11, cómo hacer la conducción sin resaltar la última semicorchea y qué ligadura podría hacer en el compás 23.
Hello, Dania, I have 3 questions. She wants to know how to make the bass line stand out more, and at measure 11, how to perform the melodic line without highlighting the last 16 notes, and what slurs do you recommend in measure 23?
right.
All right, we're unmuted now.
Yeah. First of all, great job, Dania.
Yes,
Thank
wonderful
you.
job,
Wonderful
Dania.
playing. And
You've really improved so much because I mean, you were always good, but I heard you, a year ago, and you've really come a long way, really. So congratulations on that. You have a beautiful, beautiful progress going on.
very good intonation, very clean. Lots of really good things going on with your playing.
You're not skating on the string. You have a very concentrated bow, which is awesome because that's one of the hardest things, I think, for me with Bach and a lot of people is really making sure that you have that light sound, but you're also concentrated. So we're going to talk about that. I think that's one of the biggest things I want to talk about today is, the way that you have, your bow, the way you're using your bow, because I think you're doing so many beautiful things. And I just want to make sure we get the most out of your beautiful playing. So I'm going to get my cello out here.
I have my violin here too, just in case, because these cello suites, there are so many challenges that are very, very close to what we have to deal with on the violin. So we thought it might be fun to kind of for both of us to pitch in. How's the sound?
It's good. Let us know how the sound is. I think it's fine since we switched from the screen share back. Also, let us know. I didn't see any comments saying they couldn't hear the screen share. But if for some reason there was any problem with the screen share, definitely let us know because we want you to hear that recording. This is our first time doing that on the live, so we want to be sure that there weren't any glitches because we wanted you to hear Dania's beautiful performance. So Dr. Sykes is keeping an eye on the chat. I also have the chat up here, but we'll be keeping an eye on that. Please ask questions. Please say good morning. Please check in. We love to hear from you guys, even if it's just, hi, I'm here. We really like to see activity in the chat because one of the reasons we do this live is because we like the interaction. We miss interacting with people because of the pandemic and everything. So please interact in the chat. We'd love to hear from you.
And if you from Mexico, if you're watching, if you're one of the students or one of our friends from Mexico, please let us know. And like I said, feel free, if you just tuned in, feel free to translate into Spanish any of our comments if you would like. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to, we did get a lot of new subscribers, so if you're just tuning in for the first time, please, if you have any questions related to violin playing or viola playing, cello playing, string playing, music in general, performance, please feel free to post the question in the chat, maybe even if you feel like it's not exactly related to this particular piece, but we would love to hear from you.
Yes, and that helps us also plan future episodes too. When we see your comments about topics that are interesting. So great. So I want to start first of all again. Great job, wonderful job.
Yay! Bravo.
So this Courante is part of the first Bach suite. This is one of my favorite movements in that suite, if not my favorite. It's so fun. It's cute. It's amazing. Like it's just the cutest little movement. I love it, and it's really fun to play. But I have a funny story about it though.
And I would say I just thought about it. That it's very ironic because I'm feeling so sleepy today. So the story will tell you why this is the perfect piece for a sleepy morning right now.
Right. So when we were little, like I was in high school, my younger brothers, I think, were either in late middle school or early high school as well. We were living in Kansas, and my mom had this alarm on her phone, and it was the beginning of this Courante, all the way up to the first, and it would just repeat, just from that first phrase, that first, 8 measures, and so it was just go on and on and on because we all, as a family, we enjoy sleeping, so we are those people that just let the alarm go and go and go. So it was so funny because I actually ended up working on this Courante some more for undergraduate auditions, and when I was working on it, I was like, man, all I can think about is that alarm.
Yes. That kind of makes me nostalgic, and I don't know, guys. First of all, Amazing Videos says good morning, Amazing Videos, and thank you for tuning in. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but if you're as old as I am and you were there at the dawn of cell phone civilization, it used to be like everyone wanted to have their own ringtone. I don't know if you remember, maybe you even remember that. And I remember actually having this as a ringtone. You could have this little Courante as a ringtone. There were a lot of classical little snippets that you could have as your ringtone, and this one was very popular. But if you've noticed, like for the past 5 or 6 years, all of a sudden everybody went back to generic ring, and so when you're at the store, like you never know if it's your phone. I wonder what happened. If you have any ideas or any thoughts about why all of a sudden people stopped, what's called customizing their ringtones, let us know. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah.
Or if you ever had a ringtone before that was a classical piece, let us know in the chat. That would be really fun.
For sure. Awesome. So I'll talk a little bit about, first I want to answer Dania's questions before I talk about anything else. And she actually addressed a lot of the things that I would probably talk about anyway, so it's like she read my mind already. So first of all, she asked how to make the bass line stand out. And I think, Dania, I think you're already doing a really great job of making the bass line heard. You are giving it enough resistance. You have a good weight in the string, so the string responds. One of the biggest problems, as I mentioned earlier, is the skating. Sometimes with Bach, if you play too fast, too quickly, and don't have that contact with the string to pull it, especially on an open lower string, you won't get a good tone. Like on the A string, I don't really need much resistance. I don't need much time to make it sound. But the C string, if I use that same weight down here, it doesn't really work because you need that bite at the beginning. And it's not an accent, it's just that you have your bow on the string before you pull. And that's what you need. And you're already doing that. But I think what's happening is you're doing that on all the other strings too. And that's not a bad thing, but for this purpose, it can hinder the expression of the bass line because everything is at an equal volume. Everything is at an equal level. So I think at this point, you know the notes, and at this point, you can work on, these great questions about phrasing. It has to do less with what you're doing in your left hand, but more with what you're doing in the right hand. So first of all, I want to mention articulation. I think sometimes your articulation gets a little long. Try to keep it a little more bouncy, a little shorter. And then as we talked about, keeping that resistance for the G string, making sure you bite it, at the beginning, that little bite. And we do that with the first finger. That's what's controlling that. But for the beginning, you can actually lighten up here, and that will bring out the bass line inherently, just automatically. So little lighter pressure, and then kind of a small crescendo into the bass line. And then you have, make sure you get a good nice bow on the bass line. And then back to a lighter pressure for, so you have that little bit of time so you hear clearly that 2, 3. You have that bass line very clearly coming out there. So just like that. So lightening up the articulation on the other notes, keeping it nice and full on the lower notes on the bass line, but lightening up just a little bit on the melodic line. I think that's going to help a lot with what you're asking. And then keeping the articulation a little bit shorter on the melodic line, but I still like it a little longer on the bass note, personally. I don't want it to be too short, because I want it to ring, and I want that to be still in the audience's ear when I play that B. And that's the beauty of, playing open G there, because you can just keep it. And I mean, Bach was kind of a genius in that way, because he has these open strings where they just ring, and so it's like the chord is forming itself for you, even though you're only playing, a melody, you're not playing chords, it feels like you are, because you have this nice resonance going on.
Can I pitch something?
Yeah,
in?
go
Because
ahead.
what I love what you're doing, because I know you're so on the, like, what is it, hit the nail on the head, or how you say it in English.
Yeah.
Because the contrast, so I love how you're talking about the contrast between the voices, which directs the audience's attention to, in this case, right? So But there's another thing that you're doing so well, and you were talking about the beginning, but also I've noticed that when you playing the bass, not only you're starting it on the string, but you're not killing the note. At the end of that note, you lighten up so that even though you're leaving the string, you're letting the... So for example, this is what I was thinking, I love what you're doing. So if there's a way to do it...
Joaquin said hi. Hi, Joaquin.
Hi, Joaquin. So do you see how now if I changed the ending of the bass, it wouldn't have that ringing effect. You see, so what I love that
is the air time.
Yes, and also that you're starting on the string and you're lightening toward the end, and you're not killing the note at the end, and so there's that beautiful echo and resonance, and it's just really, really nice. I love that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you explained that. I was actually talking to some of my students about this past week because one of my beginners, we've been working through like the Essential Elements book, and there's this Arkansas traveler, and we were talking about like staccato, and we were kind of like, and I was like, how do I explain? Like I was like, I know what I want it to sound like, but how do I explain that? And I realized it's the air, it's the space.
Yeah.
So Arkansas Traveler, everybody.
Yeah.
From book 1 of Essential Elements. It's
okay.
a great book. If you need a beginner book, Essential Elements is awesome. I really like that book.
We got a lot of highs. Lydia Stepanyan, that's my mom. Good morning. Good morning.
Our most loyal fan.
Yes.
Our biggest fan.
And Diana Gonzalez, good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah, we love hearing the good mornings. It's really fun. It might seem silly because you're like, but we like it. We like it. It's not silly to us.
You know, we're performers. You know, it's in our DNA. We love interaction. I think that's the reason, you know, you become a performer. Because there's a difference between loving music and maybe recording a piece and actual performance. I think it's that interaction, and believe it or not, but even through the internet you can still feel something is going on when it's live. It's totally different. I just really love live streams. It reminds me a little bit more of our normal face-to-face in old times performances, so hopefully we get back. Okay,
absolutely. So continuing onward, so the next question you, Dania, had was how to play the melodic line in measure 11 without making the last 16th note stand out. And that's a really great question. And that actually, it's the same, I don't want to say issue, it's not a problem. It's the same area of you know, the bow and the articulation. That's what's going to help solve that problem. So I totally know what you mean. So the part she's talking about is here. That little, because you don't want it to sound like, you know, you don't want it to be too much, but it's also like, you can't, if you don't, it's really easy to get way too far out, and then all of a sudden you're out here and you're like, how did I get here?
So
exactly. Yes.
Awful feeling.
Totally. I think it's like a rite of passage with Bach to like have that feeling where you're like, I don't have enough bow.
Yes, you're right. Bach does it a lot.
He does.
I don't know what it is about Bach, but he was just mean like that to us.
So for this particular stroke, you want to stay in the lower half, and I'm sure, Dania, I'm sure you feel that, because that's why you're asking. You're probably like, I need to stay in the lower half, but it feels like I'm, you know,
it's like a cannon, pow, pow,
yeah,
at the very last 16th of the beat, right, where you don't want it like that.
Right. So the thing here is the same thing. It's the air time. It's the air that you're using to release the note. So instead of, and I'm exaggerating, you know, very strongly, just to come across. That's not how you sound. So actually, the slur is good. That's good. But then when you get here, you're actually going to propel yourself. So you're not, you're going and back. So you're making this little loop for yourself. And that leaves you in a great space where so I'm staying here and then lightening up my pressure a little bit on that 16th so it doesn't sound like. And also you have more time to play it than you think you do. Sometimes we cut it off because we're like, I'm falling behind, but it's solo Bach. You can take a little more time. And then keep going.
Very nice, very beautiful. But you know, also that next line actually, it's kind of nice that the things are starting to pop up in the when it starts ascending. It's kind of nice.
And that's thanks for reminding me of that because I was telling her before this that I wanted to say something about that. That it's not bad for those notes to come out a little bit
once they start like changing, forming a line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here with the E's, you know, those not too much, but here, it's a really, you know, it's a clear ascending scale to the dominant D, and that's really important. So you want to, when you're playing those, you can bring them out a little bit more. I like to use dynamics there, so just like bring it up. So maybe coming down on that downward scale. You can even take a little time. Now the interesting part is in the scale. You're just playing. That's not the interesting part. The interesting part is right. That's the interesting part. So that's what you want to highlight there. And so, and when I say highlight, you know, you don't want it to be, you know, aggressively like punching it, but you know, there that you can hear that clear line because that's what you need when you're playing for an audience. It's like. Kind of like when you're telling a story and there's, you know, when you tell a story, you have a flow, you have a rhythm, you have details that you want to highlight. And if you don't highlight the details that are important in a story, with whether it's your vocal inflection or the dynamic with which you're speaking, then the story, sometimes the punchline is lost on people. So this is kind of like, we're trying, it's like, music is one big joke with a punchline. No, it's like, but it kind of is like, it's like you don't want it to feel like a clique of people who have this inside joke that no one else can understand. You want to bring everybody in and explain what you think is great about the music so that they get it too.
You know, I love that analogy because you know, as musicians, and most of you guys who are listening are musicians, educators, probably professional performers, and you know, it wasn't that long ago when it dawned on me that when I prepare a piece, I live with that piece for a long time. First of all, because violin or cello are just really hard instruments to even get to know the notes and everything else and then go beyond that. So what happens, I actually see that story in music. I live with that story. So that seeing that story that you're talking about in a piece is very natural for us, for those of us who are preparing a piece. But it's not as natural for your audiences. So for my students, you know, and I remember my teachers, they always said, whatever you're trying to express, you have to make it 10 times more in order for your audiences to hear. And what you're saying, that analogy with the story is a great analogy, because we forget that the audience hasn't spent that much time with this piece, so they don't know the story that for us seems very obvious. And so these kind of things like highlighting the, for example, anytime you have notes forming a straight line up or down or congregation, and you see this certain movement, that's probably an important storyline, whether it's crescendo, diminuendo, or whether it stays at the same line. It reminds me of electricity, you know. The reason electricity is powerful because the particles are lining up and they're going the same direction. I hope that's right, but that's the gist of it, you know, a very unscientific. So I feel like in music, a lot of times, in the places where you start seeing that very, very obvious direction and consistent direction in one movement of notes in one direction, usually it's up or down, that's a very good sign that something important is happening. And so a lot of times it would be either accumulation of energy or the opposite. But that's how those are the beginnings of actually trying to make sense of phrasing in a Bach, especially in Bach, where you're all alone and you have to be like one musician orchestra kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree for sure. That's really, really important. I'm trying to think if there's any other spots where this happens. It does happen also at the end in 36, same thing. Same thing. And that one's really important because it's, you know, the tonic, the G. But yeah, that's a great question, and it's a very common thing to ask. But and yeah, the story and, you know, electricity, all that, it makes so much sense. And doing these little things, you know, the reason we practice these technical things and tedious little details is, you know, so we can eventually tell that bigger story and not, you know, I think sometimes we can get in our heads a little bit, get nervous, but really, you know, the point of us playing is to let people enjoy the music. Yeah. So, but good. So I'm going to keep going. She asked about the bowing for measure 23 and what slurs do I recommend. So I'm currently using the Barenreiter version. I have the one with the bowings in front of me. I also have, you know, the one that's unmarked with all the manuscripts that my mom got me for Christmas a few years ago, which is awesome. It's like this box set, and I have all of those, which are really useful if you're exploring Bach, you know, with or without a teacher, but especially without a teacher, it's really great to have those manuscripts in front of you, because there's lots of different, like, there's different manuscripts, versions, and there's always different markings in them, so you can kind of pick and choose what you like. But
just for the violinists out there, if you're a violinist and you're wondering, there is, speaking of manuscript, my favorite, like, I really like international edition of violin, partitas and sonatas. They're edited by Mr. Galamian, and one of the coolest thing in that edition is also, if you go to the very back, they actually published the manuscript of Bach's writing of, so you could see how he actually wrote it, what he put in there, which slurs are there, which are not. Awesome. So that's just going along.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good to know, because I think there's so many different versions of it out there. It's hard to know what to pick, but the Barenreiter I really like, and most people I know, that's a really good standard with the ones that has the bowings in it. Like, those are reputable bowings to go off of. The Barenreiter
Plus,
edition.
they're very they're famous for their accuracy. They are so particular. They also have measure numbers usually, and they're super accurate. Because one of the things about editions, you know, I know for pianists that's like obvious, but for us string players, because we have to deal with the bowings and things like that, you know, we don't think of that part of the edition. But certain editions like Barenreiter, they put so much work into making sure that everything they put in is accurate, and they don't make any mistakes in the actual text of the pieces. And that's why also it's a good idea to go with more reputable editions when you're buying books of Bach, because these are iconic pieces that people know in the business, and even people who are not in the business, you know, how you hear those pieces so often. And so if you end up playing it for a serious audition or anywhere an important performance, it's so important that you don't end up making a silly mistake in the text just because the edition that you were using wasn't good enough to be precise and to check for, you know, all these misprints or things like that. So that's why Barenreiter is definitely very, very reputable in that sense.
Absolutely. And yeah, for Violins International, I don't really know much about the Cello International because I've always pretty much used Barenreiter, but you can check it out too.
I just like Mr. Galamian's.
Well, yeah, because Mr. Galamian is awesome. He's the
and
goat.
international is they're also very they're also very reputable, and they're very accurate, and they're very decently priced. That's another thing. It's like I work with students, and I feel like it's not that I'm not saying it's the only one, the best, but it's a really good value for. So it's something that you can be very confident about, having great editors and great accuracy, but also it's priced like in the medium somewhere range, which is really good for students.
Absolutely. Yes. So so measure 23, this is part of a sequence of 3. Also, that's a good thing. I'll talk about the rule of 3 a little bit, but basically there's a lot of times where Bach does things 3 times in a row, and one of the greatest pieces of advice I've received about phrasing Bach and understanding it is to always look for those places where he uses 1, 2, 3. And my teacher that told me called it like the rule of 3, where that if you see 3 of something, you have to do something with those. That you have to either grow or go less or something, but you have to do something to make those interesting, because he's repeating those phrases.
And in Baroque times, they did have a lot of symbolism in music, so it sounds like Trinity, this could easily be something, one of those things.
Absolutely, and Bach was, a believer in God, so there is a lot of symbolism in his music. So when you see like 3, like for the Trinity, it's usually the number 3 is pretty important. And this movement is in 3/4, it's in triple meter. But so for measure 23, it's part of this those 3 patterns. And this one's not super clear, but it is still like 3 similar measures. And so what I like to do is I keep the slur. So I see in measure 23 in this edition, they split it up. They have, or they have. For me personally, I like to keep the big slur. So because the first one has the big slur. Keep them the same, because for me and the way I like to use my bow, it makes it easier. But if you're finding that it's difficult to make some sort of difference, if you want it to sound more different there, you can definitely separate it. The only thing I would make sure to do is I do maybe an up here, so either there or do split these as well. Whatever you do, just to make sure you end up down bow on the next measure on the F natural, because you don't want to end up up bow there, because it feels really bad. This does not feel good. So my answer to your question at 23 is I like to keep the big slur, which is also written in here, but it's also okay to split it up. But if you split it up, make sure that you make sure that you fix the bowing in the next measure so that you end up on a down bow in measure 25. So that's my answer to that. And I mean, I'm not, everybody's so different with, what they prefer. So if you have a different bowing in your part, feel free to play around with that too. But basically,
let us know.
Let us know. But basically, the point is, do whatever you want.
Hi, Adriana. Adriana is saying,
hi, Adriana.
So much. Just so great to see you. Great to see you too. We have also Largia Musica. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I don't know what it means, but I think it's in Spanish probably. But thank you so much for tuning in. So we're talking about Courante, famous Courante.
Yes. From
you know what I love? What you were when you were talking about the bowings. I don't know if you've noticed, but you were always coming out of the perspective of where the line is, and I think that is great. I think I remember growing up, I was very fortunate to have. I was fortunate to have the most amazing, my first teacher who taught me how to play violin, and that was Bach. in former Soviet Union, yes, I'm very, very old. Most of you probably don't even know what that was. It was like an old, scary country. Everybody was afraid, but actually it wasn't that scary. It was great. But anyway, so the thing is, like, both of my mom and dad, they were in music business, but they were in like a rock band business. They were singers and they weren't really classically trained. So it was God's provision that when I ended up playing, starting to learn violin, I ended up with the best teacher ever. And my first teacher, Miss Fatima Fatkulna Idiatulina, she's still in Baku, Azerbaijan, where I lived, when I was born and was raised, and where I learned how to play, and then later on went to Moscow Conservatory. And she's still the most amazing teacher. She was only 25 years old when I started studying with her. So she was...
I'm turning 25 in May.
Yeah, so I adored her. I hated the lessons because she made me work hard, but I adored her because I knew she was really, really pushing me, and she saw a lot on me. But even being such a great teacher, I remember a lot of times she would share with me, she said, I'm not really that confident with changing bowings. So she would always just kind of go with very respected additions and just kind of follow the bowings. Because she said, I don't quite always know what the bowings are about, and if it's okay to change them here or not. And so what you were saying, I think and I think it's important to try to understand how that works. I'm sure she did, but in those days there were so many rules and things were a little different. But I think once you understand that the reason for the bowing is first and foremost is to convey phrasing, and then after that, of course, like you said, for it to be comfortable also. So if you just go from both, so find the most comfortable way to express phrasing that the composer put in there, and that's like the best bowing usually for you or for your student.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about, you want it to be with something like Bach. There's some bowings that are traditional and things that everybody does, but there's a lot of room for changing things, and it really is up to like what's comfortable for you and what feels good, and like as long as it sounds good and conveys the message and stays in like the general framework, I think it's fine. And you can always ask me or Dr. Seitz, or if you have teachers like that you trust, you can talk to them, because chances are, they probably went to school or, have some sort of knowledge of, that kind of thing. In other things, you have a lot more freedom, like if you're playing the swan or something, like that's obviously, you can bow that however you want, or other things. And then there's, so there's lots of different things you can do with that. But as far as Bach, it's important to, like as we said, find a good addition, but also important to play around with it and change something.
Going back to that, actually this little that little 3 down and 1 up is actually a very difficult thing to feel. So one of the best ways to practice a certain bowing that you're maybe not comfortable with is play a scale. For example, if you're playing like a 3 octave G major scale, you can practice your bowing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Do you want to do that together for fun?
Let's try it. Do you want to do it like in third?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, but without extra notes. Oh my goodness, let's see.
Should I start or you start?
You start. Okay. So I won't repeat then. I'll just go straight.
Okay, yeah.
Wait, that's in 5th. So you have to start in the middle of my slow.
Yeah.
Ready? Go.
I got my fingering all messed up.
And actually, I'm so glad you brought this up, because this, goes beyond. So something like this, playing a stroke like that together, if you, for example, are playing any chamber music, well, not right now, right? But when we go back to normal playing, or before, if you remember how many ages ago when we actually sat together as a quartet and practiced, one of the hardest things for quartet, for example, string quartet, an ensemble is to match your bowings. And so let's try it again. Let's make sure that we totally match our slurs and our staccatos. And that's like if you're trying to be a really good chamber ensemble, this is one of the best ways to play together a stroke like this and make sure that you really match. Ready? Go. So if you can see, we had to make sure that not only we start the down bow and up bow together, but also that we start them on both on the string, and then that we're in the air at the same time. So all of those things are very, very important, and that's what actually gives you bow control. There's if you look at the violin book of chords or etudes, you know, the one that you probably heard before, number 2. I actually have a tutorial of that. I made it a long time ago and people really like it. So usually most of the editions, if you look at that etude in the Kreutzer book, so you have a bunch of stuff written with very, very small print at first, and then only on the bottom of the page where the etude actually starts. And those are different bowings that you could use once you know the etude. For example, you do the same, you can do the same thing with an etude. You know, or any kind of bowing that gives you trouble in Bach, because believe me, there are a lot of that in there. You can, sometimes it's very effective if you just distance yourself, so you don't get, because sometimes when you practice, if you try to fix all your problems on a piece, then you get so sick of it and you just lose that freshness and you stop seeing it as a piece of music. And so for that reason, it's great to transfer all of those as many technical elements as you have to deal with in a piece. If you can transfer them into your scales, etudes, and exercises to purely technical repertoire, then when you come back to the actual piece, first of all, it'll be much easier for you to play, and second, it will be more rewarding because you won't get sick after repeating it a million times.
Yep. So yeah, just in case anybody's joining, just for this passage, practice the scale, keep the air time. Make sure you're making that loop for yourself. Keep that loop going. So that's a great way to practice it. In any key you want, really. You can do minor to make it really hard.
But yeah, I don't want to do it. Not on the live stream, thank you.
Harmonic minor.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll stop goofing around. But that's awesome. So those are all the questions that Dania had. And I mentioned the rule of 3 thing, which I wanted to talk about, so I'm glad I did that. So yeah, look for those. Find those little groups of 3 that he puts. There's a lot of them. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. That was a pretty good, I think those questions covered a lot of, you know, because this movement is repetitive in regards of like articulation. It's pretty, you know, if you master just a couple of parts, then you're pretty much good for the rest of the movement. I would just say to, you know, after you get more comfortable with the bow, to explore also, you know, bow distribution in that framework. So you don't have to play every one the same length. You could explore, you know, using really more bow, less bow, and then also make sure you pay attention to what's next, because you have to plan. So, you know, if you have there, you're golden because you have this down bow, but you want to make sure you're near the frog because you want to make sure you have enough bow for that. Also on these, I play them legato. I I play them détaché. I like them a little more, not completely, so there's still a little space, just a little bit of air, but not, you don't want it to be too short. So make sure, that's another thing when you're practicing this stroke, play around with the stroke. You want it short, but not too short, still resonant, but not too long. So basically in the middle of everything. And use those scales to your advantage, like an up bow scale. Use it to, you know, it's right there for you. Use it to grow. Take a little breath there. Phrasing, you know, find those places where you have a breath, like after that cadence, you know, give yourself some time to release. Because it starts a new idea there, a new melody.
Is that in two-part form too?
Yeah, so we have...
Yeah, I want to ask you a question about, because I've noticed a lot of times my students have a little trouble with this. How do you find the right amount of space between, like, when you finish the first half and going to the second, or if you're repeating the first half, you know, usually we repeat just the first half and then go to the second, right? Again, how do you have any advice on that, and how, like, can you show us what you feel a good enough time is?
Generally, if you're doing it in a performance and you're repeating the first half, for the first one, I make it pretty metronomical, so... Pretty metronomical, so keeping it in rhythm, but the second one... Maybe take a little of extra time, or a little bit of a slowdown or a ritardando before. Not too much, maybe just like an extra little 16th, I don't know. Really, the most important thing is to make sure you're ready to go on.
So it's okay, like if you felt a little bit, I think...
If you needed to take a little time,
it's
I'd
okay,
say
right? You don't have to like worry about being perfectly...
Yeah.
You know.
I'd say on the second time, it's okay. On the first time, I'd say probably keep going. Just keep it pretty metronomical. But on the second time, you know, you can take a little... Just a little bit.
And the ending, what do you think about the very end? Is it okay? Like how much, can you show us how much you would slow down at the end?
So for the very end, if you were repeating, I'd do the same thing. Or just a little... Right, and then, but if we were doing the very end... I think there it's okay to... I think. And I mean, there's different schools of thought on that. I know that there have definitely been times when I've played Bach for people where they're like, you're taking too much time, so...
But I think it's totally normal to
yeah.
Because I think for the audience, it's very, again, talking about the audience that haven't spent as much time with this piece as maybe you did if you were getting ready. I think it's important to give us a sense of conclusion, and, you know, I think... Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I think that's nice. I like, because it's kind of like, okay, this is the end of the story. Yeah.
Very nice. Can you give us, for our listeners who might be thinking of studying this piece, could you give us kind of a walkthrough? What would be like the stages of, like, if you are about to study this piece, like what would be the very first thing you do, and then the next and the next, and kind of like that? Can you walk us through that process?
Yeah. For me, the first thing I would do is just read it through, you know, not super fast. or anything, but just at a good tempo, maybe. And if you need to break up bowings at this point, that's okay because you're going slow. And at this point, just, play it through once. And then after that, after you get kind of a feel of how hi, Dr. Violin. Thank you. He says, hello, sounds great.
Hello, Dr. Violin. Thank you for tuning in.
I can't tell the picture, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
feel free to give us some questions.
Yeah. But, we're almost at an hour or so we're almost, out of time for the masterclass. I mean, we can go over if we want, but, so the second thing I would say would be to keep doing that. And for me, something rhythmic like this, like a very rhythmic movement that's rhythmically pronounced, I would use a metronome, even if it's at a slower tempo. Sometimes I find...
To make sure that your rhythms are correct.
Right? Yes, because there are a lot of places where if you're not paying careful attention, it could, you could play something wrong rhythm, or... Hold on, my computer is giving me a pop-up or something. Okay, we're good. Just wanted to be sure that didn't derail anything. But you want to be sure that, you're playing the correct rhythms. And I think using a metronome early on also helps me with bow distribution and left and right hand coordination, because it shows you exactly how much time you have. Because sometimes I think it's easy to rush yourself. So I would recommend definitely using a metronome early on. And, building up the tempo gradually with a metronome also. And as you're doing these things, start thinking about your phrasing early on. Start thinking about your dynamics early on, and your intonation as well, of course. But if you start thinking of those things early on, it's going to make it easier to learn, and also easier in the long run, because you'll have practiced those things in the beginning. So I encourage my students to do that, because sometimes I think we're like, okay, just learn the notes, and then we'll drizzle some dynamics on top, and we're good to go.
Can I insert here? What they're forgetting, dynamics is also a certain type of technique.
Exactly.
It's just as much technique.
Mm-hmm.
It takes just as much technique of playing in tune as it takes to play forte versus piano, and so your muscles need to get used to different bow distribution, different bow speed. It's not just going to magically happen, and so for that reason, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's definitely true, because if, the dynamics and the articulation, all of those things are coming from things that you're doing technically, and also it's certain things like that you have to plan your bow in a certain way to be able to do those things.
Yes.
So I find that it's really useful to do that early on and treat it as more of an integral ingredient in the final recipe rather than just like a frosting, because it's not. It's like
that's I love that analogy. Yeah, so recipe.
Yeah, I think
an ingredient in the recipe, not frosting on top. Love that.
Yeah,
totally.
It's just because it's like I think if we think that way, it kind of defeats the purpose of even using the dynamics, because it's like we don't want them to be an afterthought. We want it to be this integral part of the final structure. So yeah, that's what I would say. I'd say, start with the notes, go slowly, figure out your fingerings, and then once you have things figured out, start using a metronome, build it up. And then, while you're doing the metronome building, after you kind of get the general fingerings in your hand, you can start thinking about, at the slower tempo, start thinking about dynamics, articulations, differences you want to make, and then gradually building that tempo up. And it's okay, because you might find, you might decide something at the slower tempo, and then once you start speeding up, realize that, this doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. That happens all the time.
That's okay. Just change it.
And that's why it's good to give yourself plenty of time to not just learn the piece 2 days before your exam or your performance. Right. That's important, because violin instrument playing is what's called a fine motor skill. I think I'm saying it correctly. Yeah. So it's a little bit different from, I remember being in the conservatory, and all I wanted to do is just practice. I didn't want to do anything else. I wanted to save my time. So I was guilty of sometimes that was way before I had 3 children. So I did have pretty good memory. So I could like pull an all-nighter for like a literature, for example, and memorize all the characters and all the plots and everything, and then go next day to the exam and pass everything, and then forget it the day after, because it was mostly purely intellectual information. I think I meet students very often, especially at the beginning of their studies, that they kind of feel like they could get away with that in instrument playing, but that is not how it works, because instrument playing is not just purely intellectual information. It's a fine motor skill where that information has to start interacting with your muscle memory and all that, and psychology and everything else. So so this really happens. In fact, one of my favorite violinists, David Oistrakh, he used to say, you know, he was like one of the most amazing, incredible performers, and he would say when he was programming his concerts, like he'd have all these agencies asking him to send programs like ahead for 2 or 3 years of concerts all over the world, and he actually said, I never program a piece that I haven't learned yet. Like, and he was amazing. He already played most of the violin repertoire anyway, but he said, I don't know, I know some of my younger colleagues do that because the concert maybe is 3 years from him, but he said, I just don't do that. And this is kind of an extreme situation, but yes, that's why you need time, because it's very true that sometimes some things that work at the beginning and seem comfortable, once you get to the right tempo and once you understand how the music works better and you sort of live with the piece, you realize, oh, that's complete opposite, I'm going to change it here. And so once you change it, then you still need some time to get used to that change, right? So yeah, very good. I'm glad you mentioned that. Awesome. So what is your final test will tell us what of a piece like this or any kind of solo Bach, how do you test yourself? How do you know that, yes, I practiced enough, yes, I am ready, yes, I can give a really good performance of this piece?
2 things. One, I can perform it through in my head mentally without stumbling on any. I can see every fingering, every bowing in my head mentally. I can run it through completely in my head and hear it in my mind and see my bow and fingers working. And if I run into a hitch, I practice that and I go over my head, and I know that's a little place that maybe the learning process wasn't as solid. So that's the first step for me. Secondly, just playing it for people. Like being once I feel that I'm comfortable with it enough that I feel like, okay, I can play this for people and experiment, see how it goes. That's how I know that I'm starting to get to that point where I'm ready to perform. And you want to have it down well enough that you know the piece, so don't practice it for one day and then say, okay, I'm going to go play it for a bunch of people. You need to practice and have it solid, but then playing for people will be very revealing, and a lot of times the first time it might not go the way you want to, usually doesn't. Record that. It's really important. Record that and take note of what happened, what went well, what didn't. Practice those things. Do it again. Chances are those things are going to go well and something else is going to go wrong. So just, I think for me, the mark of being ready is being able to feel solid enough that I can run it through in my head and also play it for people and start getting outward feedback, and not just inward feedback, but outward feedback from audience members. And that's how I feel. And then after I've played it for people a few times and feel, have gotten nervous enough to make me try to emulate what it feels like to play for the performance, that's how I feel like it's ready. I'm like, okay, I've done it, and I know I can do it under pressure even when things go wrong.
Great, that's great advice. And I agree that you don't want to rush into performing for people until you're ready, because we want, because I've had some students who, they were talking about, I'm so afraid of I still have fear of performance. And, you will hear a lot of people will tell you, well, just have to perform a lot. Now, it is true, but you want to make sure, you want to think of that you're trying to get yourself experience something positive. So performance is another experience. How do you reinforce a positive experience? You have to create many positive experiences, right, that relate to something. So what happens, I've seen some students, they thoughtlessly just sign themselves up for a bunch of labs before they even know the piece. And so instead of having a lot of positive experiences performing that piece, they actually make it worse because they perform when they're not ready, and so they only intensify the stage fright. So I'm glad you mentioned that. It's very important to play, but you want to do it in a way, you want to arrange the experience, and you know yourself. You want to make sure you're ready enough where you will have a chance of actually having some positive experience. And then when you're playing it again, make sure some time passed where you could kind of digest what happened, bring it to another level so the next time is even more positive. And of course, I mean, there are always things that are going to be unpredictable, but I think that's the most important part, because you just forget that it's performance. Just think of it just a human experience. How can you make it the most positive for yourself, the most rewarding? And so, believe it or not, the more you do that, the more you will start enjoying it, and you'll be amazed how you can completely change that for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's great. So that's pretty much all I had, but I think that's a good...
Yeah, that was really great.
Point.
Thank you guys for, first of all, thanks to Joaquin and Dania for, submitting the video. Again, because of course we usually try to have our participant to perform live, but because of the Zoom, with, I guess maybe it's across the border, no, it just didn't work. So I'm glad we could do that. Guys, please nominate if you have students, if you yourself are learning. It really doesn't make, it doesn't have to be at a certain level. Any level makes a very fun lesson for us and for our listeners. There's so many different levels to enjoy violin or cello playing or viola, enjoy music. So please let us know if you would like to participate in our live stream master classes, or if you'd like, you have a student who would like to do that, let us know in our so how do we do that again? You could comment right under this video, or you could let us know on our Instagram
at Sidestring Pros, or go to dianasidesviolin.com, and there's a contact form there if you don't have Instagram.
Yeah, because it has, and you could send, and if you have a video question, we would love that. Like I said, we're going to start that new rubric in our live streams. If you have a short question you would like to ask, sometimes it's just easier to record and send a little video rather than trying to explain it in the chat. So we would love that. And again,
I think we might have wrongly said that we're meeting next week, because next week we have that conflict.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry,
okay.
guys.
So I think we're meeting on the 13th.
Yeah.
Yes, and then so the 13th. Who do we have next?
So on the March 13th, we have my wonderful student from Italy, Nora Gabuti. I met Nora in the beautiful city of Acque Terme a few years ago when I was teaching there. I taught there 2 summers in a row, and the third summer, that's when COVID happened, so I didn't go. But Nora is a violinist. She is still in Italy. She's equivalent of, I guess, high schooler, and she's getting ready to take exams to conservatory, I think next September, hopefully, if everything goes fun. And so I am helping you. We're both working on some of her repertoire for auditions in Italy in conservatories. That's very exciting. I'm glad Nora is preparing Kovalevsky's Concerto second movement. And so it's really beautiful. I know first movement is very popular, and a lot of students, a lot of people played, but the second movement is just gorgeous. So Nora is going to perform on the 13th, and we're going to have a violin master class, around that movement. And by then, hopefully, we'll also have video of our listeners' questions. Yes. Now, the next week, and I want to make sure and mention that, why we're not doing the live stream. Maybe you can mention that.
Yeah, so I wanted to say we want to dedicate this episode to our recently passed, very, very good friend, wonderful mentor, Miss Norma Cardenas. If you're from the Valley, you probably know her. And if you're in strings at all, she was an amazing orchestra director, educator, teacher, mentor, everything. She just did it all.
And a beautiful human being. She was one of the first people to welcome me here when I came for the first time to teach at the faculty at UTRGV. She's a super warm person.
Absolutely. And she was my orchestra director in middle school, and she inspired me more than anyone else, at that time. It's always hard moving as a kid, especially when you're a teenager and everything is already so awkward. And just having her as a welcoming presence made school so much easier and so much better. And she really knew how to make orchestra feel like a family.
And she was so proud of you all. I know she's looking from heaven, and we're smiling at you, sweetie, because she was always like on Facebook, always watching out for her students, always commenting whenever I asked her, and I always made sure to tag her in all of our posts, because she was just the greatest cheerleader for her students, and wonderful musician, beautiful person, and I know that she's smiling at us in heaven. So.
Yes, and so just, if you...
So we will be attending the memorial service.
Yes, we'll be attending her memorial next weekend, which is why we're not meeting, but, if you... I think she mentioned that in lieu of flowers or gifts, she wanted people to donate to the Valley Symphony in her name.
So nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so if you want to download...
Yes, please.
Download. If you want to... I've been doing too much computer work.
Yeah.
If you want to donate to the Valley Symphony in her name or anonymously or whatever you'd like, in honor of her, I know she would love that.
Is there a link that we might be able to post or not?
Yeah, I could
we'll
post
see. Maybe if we find a link where we could post under this.
Ephraim Mungia said, Miss Cardenas, she was such a wonderful person. We will miss her. Yes, we will.
Yes.
Hi,
Ephraim. Yes. Nice to hear from you. Also, Dania said thank you so much, and Joaquin said amazing. Thank you both, all for valuable.
Of course, this is
you
wonderful.
are so welcome.
We're so happy to do this, and we love working with your school.
Yes, we're dreaming about going back. We have these beautiful pictures from just beautiful conservatory, and Joaquin. I'm very proud. I was very privileged to have Joaquin actually as in my studio as a master's degree student, and I'm so glad that we created this connection because we just can't wait to go back and visit your wonderful conservatory.
Yes, we miss you all.
Okay, well, thank you so much, guys.
Everybody.
And like I said, we'll put some links in there. Have a wonderful week, and I hope that everybody's warm and healthy.
Yes, absolutely.
Bye.